Welcome. I'm Dr. Ricardo Whyte, an addiction psychiatrist here in Southern California, where I'm a medical director at one of the local detox centers. And we are talking about the 3 dimensions of your purpose. In the 2 prior videos, we discussed how your path is a critical dimension of your purpose. And then in the 2nd video, we mentioned that distilling your talent into skill is the 2nd dimension of your purpose. But then we paused and we said to ourselves, but we've all had a sense that there's this grand purpose that we are called to. What could that possibly be? That's exactly what we're going to talk about in this 3rd video installment, discussing the 3rd dimension of your purpose. So what is it? If we go to Genesis chapter 1, in that 1st chapter, we sneak up on the gods having a conversation where they say something interesting. We don't know exactly what preceded the conversation, but we do know what they concluded. They make the statement, "Let us make man in our..." Some of you at home could finish a statement for me. Let us make man in our image. And I think we've read past that phrase so often, we really never took the time to understand the huge implication that that statement is making. So let's take a moment to unpack it now. You see, when you're going to make something, if you're an artist and you're creating something, something has to inspire your creation. If you're a fashion designer, well, this fashion was inspired by the French period or the classic period, or some people, they look at animals and the animal become the source of the inspiration, right? Well, it's as if these gods were talking and they were like, what will be the source of the inspiration for this creature? You. And as they considered the seas, and the amazing whales and everything that's amazing in the sea and in the oceans, they said, just not amazing enough. As they looked on land and they saw amazing lions and tigers and powerful animals and amazing mountains, they looked at it and they said, it's just not amazing enough. It's just not magnificent enough. And maybe they considered the skies and all their vastness and their splendor, and considered stars perhaps as vast as a VY Canis Majoris. It's a star that's 1.9 billion miles in diameter. And they said, that's just not astronomic enough for this creation. For this creation, in order to create you, the source of this inspiration will be God Himself. And you understand, the gods, they don't do anything without purpose. So I'm suggesting to you that you've been designed to be like a god. I understand the implications of that. You've been empowered with the power to be godlike. Whatever thing it is that you love, whatever skill set it is, whatever talent you have the responsibility to develop it until it's at that godlike standard. Have you ever thought about that? Do you actually have the ability to do that? So we're going to talk about some illustrations. And before we get to the illustration, have you ever heard people trying to identify what is the standard that they should compete against? Of course, sometimes you're tempted to look at a person's performance and say, hey, I want to be better than that person. And so sometimes you'll get a coach and the coach will say, no, don't compete against them. Compete against yourself. I want to increase the standard just a little. You're not even supposed to be competing against yourself. When you're trying to establish your standard for excellence, your job is to compete against your concept of what God would look like doing that thing. You're trying to compete against the godly standard. And at that level, you can see why you would constantly be trying to get better and better and better and better. And so now let's go to some illustrations of some people who've tried to do just that. For the first one, you know him well. It's none other than Michael Jordan. And he illustrates beautifully what we've been talking about in terms of the 3 dimensions of purpose. First, let's talk about his path. How did his path contribute to his purpose? Well, you will recall, right, that Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Remember it said that he was cut? Well, I was doing a little research on it, and it turns out he actually wasn't cut. So I guess it depends on what account you read. No, he wasn't cut. He made the team. But what happened was he didn't make the varsity team. And what's interesting is it wasn't traditional for sophomores to make the varsity team. So why was Michael so disappointed? Because that year, a sophomore did make the varsity team. It's just it wasn't him. So it sounds like he made the junior varsity team. Michael went home to a bathroom. He cried his eyes out. But I want to let you know that what emerged from that bathroom was the mindset of a champion. And you start to see that both that bathroom and Michael's experience battling his brothers, it nurtured a spirit of competitiveness in him that helped to produce a champion's mindset. He constantly developing his talent, distilling his talent into skill, the second dimension of purpose. You'll recall that in Michael's second season in the NBA, Michael gets hurt. But then he comes back with enough time to lead his Chicago Bulls against Larry Bird's Celtics. Some would argue the greatest team of all time. Here in Laker country, we differ, of course. But he faces Larry Bird and his Celtics in the Boston Garden, and Michael puts on one of his performances of a lifetime. He scores 63 points in the Boston Garden. Larry Bird is then interviewed about what it was like playing Michael Jordan. Larry Bird says this. He says, "No one could have done what Michael Jordan did to us that night." And then he says this, "It was as if we were playing God in the disguise of Michael Jordan." It was as if we were playing God in the disguise of Michael Jordan. This summer, we were able to witness the awesome performance of Michael Phelps. And one of the news accounts mentioned he looked like God in the pool. What are people saying about your performance? What level of quality, what level of artistry have you brought to your performance? As a wife, as a father, as a clinician, as a child of God? What level of excellence have you brought to your performance? Are people saying you're godlike? That's our purpose. That's what we've been called to. That's the awesome and majestic third dimension of our purpose. In every situation we find ourselves in, we're supposed to show what God looks like in that situation. In every situation, especially the dark moments, especially the difficult moments, because that's when it really counts. So often as Christians, right, we'll pray this prayer, "Lord, help everything to go well today. Help me to have a nice, easy life. Lord, please make sure there are no challenges." When in fact, the very thing God needs is for us to show what He looks like in difficult situations. We all have family members or ourselves have served in the military, and we know every branch of the military, for the most part, has what are called the special forces. And these are the people who get the difficult missions. These are the people who they at times get those missions where it's expected there are going to be some high casualty rates. There's a low probability this is going to be successful. Who's going to volunteer for this one? And that's why we'll call them the special forces. Of course, we value all of our military. There's no question about that. But what if you could be God's special forces? What if he could look to you for the difficult missions? What if you could show what he looks like going through your bout with cancer? What if you could still remain faithful even going through that? What if perhaps at work, in the adversity that you're experiencing, despite the temptation to be frustrated and to give up, you could actually remain committed to being godlike? What if you could take that on? What if you really could be godlike? I remember sharing this with some high school students, and the young lady, she asked me, "That sounds hard." And it is in fact hard. And so God would be unfair to ask us to act godlike, but then not give us the power to be godlike. Not God, because that's why we get all stressed out. Some of us are up here trying to act like God. He didn't ask us to be God. He asked us to be God-like. Big difference, big difference. One of them is blasphemy, okay? But what if he gave us a skill set? What if he empowered us and endowed us with the ability to be godlike? Well, let's talk about your neurobiology. How many neurons occur in the adult human brain? We estimate about 100 billion, about 100 billion neurons. And those neurons, they actually connect with one another. One neuron can have how many connections? One neuron can have up to 250,000 connections, depending on what account you read. Well, what will determine if two neurons will connect, or synapse? Believe it or not, our very behaviors will drive whether or not our neurons connect. But it's so much deeper than that. It turns out even your thought patterns, your very thought patterns will affect whether your neurons connect or not. It's almost as if you can think your way into a new brain. It's amazing. You can affect how your neurons network themselves, and you start to see why it is so dangerous to entertain a negative pattern of thinking. You're literally causing your brain to restructure itself. And you start to understand why it is so critical for you to be thinking in terms of positively, based in reality, but of course, thinking in terms of, I can do that. There's a way. It's possible. We've been challenged. We were called to be creators. In this segment, what we discussed was our purpose is to be godlike. It's an awesome calling, but it absolutely is possible. You should not be competing against yourself. You should be trying to bring your level of performance to the standard of your concept of godlikeness. That's what you're competing against. Secondly, we reviewed Michael's life as one illustration. You see, there are numerous people in the NBA, numerous people with talent. But what sets apart the greats are they commit themselves to distilling their talent into skill. And when they display that skill, we get a flicker. We get to see a flicker of what God would look like doing that thing. Again, they're not God, but they're God-like in that specific thing. And we reviewed the awesome power God has entrusted us with so that we can deliver these amazing performances. So now our biggest problem If our calling is to be godlike and God's greatest quality is creating, how should we create? In my final video, I'll talk to you about how we can solve that problem. And that's where I'll make an offer and explain to you how you can take an even deeper study into understanding how it is that we should master create. So allow me to summarize. So allow me to outline your action items. And so, as usual, you know, make sure you are journaling about how it is you can display godlikeness. What skills, what talents have you been entrusted with that you need to elevate the standard of? Journal about that. Also, be sure you enter a comment below. That's so important. Be sure you enter a comment below this video and share with us your thoughts and what was the most helpful to you. And then, of course, let me know if you're interested in the offer. Please comment on that as well. I'd like to leave you with the reminder that your path is the first dimension of your purpose. Converting your talent into skill is the second dimension of your purpose. And the third dimension of your purpose is you've been called to be like God and been empowered to do so as well. So in the last installment, we'll talk about what the real issue is, what a huge issue is, but then we'll talk about also how it is we solve that issue of being called to create. Well, then how should we create? Join us next time, and thank you for spending this time with us. Be sure you leave a comment. God bless.